This is a 1TDX kit built by us. And this is a 1TDX kit built by one of our customers. This kit was recently returned, and while it's structurally sound, visually it's a mess. So at this point, we had a choice. Do we just clean it up and sell it as a B-stock? Or do we go completely over the top for some good old-fashioned YouTube porn? So of course, we decided to push it way further than necessary. New cabinet geometries, an all-new crossover, and a ridiculously expensive Beryllium tweeter. I'm Kerry Arms, I'm one of the owners of CSS, and today we're hot rodding a 1TDX kit. Originally, the plan was simple: clean up the cabinet, refinish it, and call it done. But once we got into it, we realized this would be a really good opportunity to show some things that you can do with the flat pack to really dress it up and take it from a basic kit to something that looks really high-end, so you have something that looks like a $10,000 to $15,000 speaker. And that's when we decided to add some real hardwood side panels, big roundovers and chamfers everywhere, some aluminum accents, and a high-end looking wrap. But we didn't stop there. We decided to throw in a pure beryllium dome out of Germany. But here's the catch. Getting to the performance of a $10,000 to $15,000 speaker isn't just about putting expensive parts in a nice looking cabinet. There are a few critical things that completely determine whether a speaker sounds just average or truly high-end. As I mentioned, this speaker was actually returned to us by one of our customers. And while, again, there's nothing structurally wrong with it, visually it's pretty clear where it fell short. And that's really common with DIY designs. Getting great sound is one skill set, and then building and finishing a cabinet that looks and feels high-end is a completely different skill set. One of the really interesting things about our company is we actually have a 30-day return policy even on our kits. So if you've built it and you don't like it, you can send it back. That's how confident we are that you're going to love our speakers. And over the 8 years or so we've been in business, we've only had about 4 returns, this being one of them. And this one came all the way back from Taiwan. So this customer apparently really did not like our speakers. And I've already run into my first problem here. As I'm doing the roundovers on the tops and bottoms of the cabinet, I've had some really bad blowout on this Baltic birch, and we're going to have to see if we can fix that later. So for now, I'm just going to keep going as is. Unfortunately, that's going to create a few additional problems because it's going to create some waviness in the face when the bearing rides into those tear-outs. I just couldn't find a better way to do this than kind of doing it as is and then patching after. Over the years, one of the challenges I've really struggled with in building speakers has been designing a speaker that not only sounds high-end, but also looks high-end. And practicing skills like woodworking definitely help, but there's still this last little element that took me a long time to learn. And what I've found after years of studying how other companies are putting stuff together and watching every build video that I can from anyone's factory is that one of the key things you have to focus on is what areas are going to be really easy to finish and what areas are going to be really hard to finish, and how do you manage those transition points. So what I'm doing here is putting a big round over on the cabinet because I'm going to wrap it in vinyl. So this round over is going to make the vinyl wrap a little bit easier. It's going to make the corners tuck a little bit easier. And then instead of wrapping the entire cabinet in vinyl, I'm only going to wrap 4 sides, and then I'm going to cap them with some wood on the ends. Now that still leaves a transition point for where this vinyl has to match up. There's going to be some kind of seam somewhere. So what I'm going to do to manage that is I'm going to cut a dado at 2 places on the cabinets. The seam is going to meet up down in that dado groove, and then I'm going to cover that with some aluminum. And that will give it a really kind of high-end look and hide the seams. And this is all going to be like fairly easy to put together, but it'll look really nice once it's done. But again, the finish is only one part of this equation. The next step in getting really high-end sound is getting good data. To start, we need accurate impedance data, and to get that, I'm using a simple Dayton Audio DATS. This tool allows you to not only measure impedance data, but to accurately measure TS parameters for a speaker, and in my opinion is the easiest way to get started for a first-time DIYer. There are definitely cheaper options out there like building your own limp jig, but that requires a little bit of additional know-how and leaves some room for uncertainty, whereas DATS is basically a foolproof option that comes with a nice software package. This is only my second time wrapping vinyl, and the first time I used one of the industrial contact cements that has some pretty bad fumes, but as I'm working on this project, it's a little too cold to open up any of the doors or windows for ventilation. And since we don't have an area set up to do this type of work regularly, I decided to try the low odor contact cement. And I will tell you, no matter what anyone says, it does not work anywhere close to as good as the industrial stuff. So going forward, I will be working exclusively with the toxic kill my brain cells type of stuff. Now, I know this is vinyl, and some of you might be saying, oh, I should have used real leather if I want to make this a really high-end build. And sure, maybe. This vinyl's still going to look really, really nice, and it was something that we had left over from another project, so I thought the white would go well with this design. So we're using this, but if I were doing this for a customer and trying to charge these prices, I would definitely be using real leather. So again, with the vinyl, the points that you need to be concerned about as you're trying to make this look nice are the transition points. So we want to try to hide those seams as much as we can. So here I'm wrapping the vinyl underneath the speaker cutouts, and that will hide that seam. And now I'm cutting the aluminum for that seam that I mentioned earlier where the wrap of the vinyl comes around the cabinet and joins up. We recently purchased a Bamboo Labs H2D 3D printer, and this video is not sponsored by them, but I wanted to talk about how awesome this product is because we've been using it basically non-stop since we got it. And one of the things I'm going to do here is we bought it with the laser attachment, and I'm going to show you a technique to put some laser engraving on aluminum. And since you can't technically engrave aluminum with the diode laser that comes with this, we're going to have to kind of fake it a little bit. So I'm spraying the aluminum with some matte lacquer, and then the laser is basically going to cut that lacquer away, leaving kind of a ghost image. And like I said, this Bamboo Labs printer has been awesome, and basically everything about it has been excellent. The software is super user-friendly. It's really easy to get set up in printing. I had never 3D printed anything in my life before. I'd never designed anything in CAD before, but it's made it really easy, and I'm 3D printing some parts on this project. I've 3D printed some jigs with it, and right now I'm using the laser module to do this engraving. The only problem I have ran into so far is that there appears to be a slight offset between the camera and reality in this overhead view, and that might be my fault, but it took me several attempts to really dial this in because of the small parts and the small margin for error. I had to play around a bit with the power level and then kind of where to place that image to get it right. And you can see some of the early samples here. But after a number of tries, I was able to dial that in, and I've got the final product, which you'll see at the end. To adhere these to the cabinet, I'm just going to use some CA glue. I left a little bit of a crease that will expose some edges in between the vinyl. So I am applying it to both the vinyl and to the wood, and I'm going to press it down in there as tight as I can get it. Now here's where things start to get kind of interesting. Normally you design the box around the drivers, but in this case we're working kind of backwards. We're taking an existing cabinet and trying to retrofit a driver into it. Now the woofer, obviously we've used in this box thousands of times, and it's already tuned and sized to that appropriately. But for the tweeter, it's a little bit different. This tweeter has a faceplate that's a slightly smaller diameter, but also much thicker than ours. And it's definitely possible to retrofit this tweeter and mount it flush in this cabinet, but one of the things that we were looking at was making this a potential upgrade path for existing customers. So we wanted to make this doable by anyone who already has one of our existing kits. Since we're starting from that cabinet, let's go all out. And so we're 3D printing an adapter here to make this mount correctly in the cabinet. And now we're at the point of mounting everything into the cabinet so that we can start to take some frequency response measurements. Getting these measurements right is crucial so that you have accurate data to model with. And one of the things I was concerned about was the addition of the 1-inch thick side panels and how they would affect the measurements. Since we wanted this to be able to be turned into a kit, I needed to make sure that this would work with our standard size flat packs as well. So I built some quick panels with 1-inch roundovers that could easily be removed for testing with and without. And we'll get to the results of that test here in a few minutes. But right now I want to talk about how the crossover came together on this. So all these measurements are with 1/48th octave smoothing, and we haven't spliced in any bass response on this yet. The first version of this crossover had a pretty flat response and a really good power response, but once I started looking at the slopes of where the tweeter was at, I realized that the tweeter was being pushed way too low, and we were going to have some rising distortion at the lower end of the tweeter, and this could also lead to some potential tweeter failures. So this isn't going to be good. The second version of this crossover pushes the tweeter about as low as I was comfortable, which is about 1600 hertz. At this crossover point, the tweeter seemed to be able to handle it pretty well. The only downside was that it does create more of a dip in the power response. I did need to use a notch filter here. The tweeter has a little bit of a natural rise around 5 kilohertz, and I think that the adapter plate is probably making that a little bit worse. So the notch filter helps to flatten that area back out. Now, back to that test that I had mentioned earlier. What I found was that, as expected, there's a little bit of smoothing on and off axis from the roundovers, but what was surprising was that the level of change was much smaller than I expected based on a rather large change in baffle geometry. And I think this really goes to show that anyone who states some kind of hard and fast golden rule, like your baffles have to have roundovers or you're doing it wrong, probably only has a small piece of a much larger puzzle. And the reality is that all of the peer-reviewed studies can't find a definitive link between measured diffraction and audibility. I bought some butcher block countertop from Home Depot for the side panels, and my plan was to do this kind of as quick and easy as possible, and also make this something that would be easily replicatable by someone who doesn't have all of the tools required to joint in plain wood. But what I found after buying this was that the wood kind of sucked. It was mostly sapwood, and it had a lot of voids and splits in it, and it wasn't even very cheap to begin with, so I was pretty disappointed in this, and I would never recommend you buy this. It took quite a bit of work to clean this up and fill all the cracks and voids. Overall, I probably added about a half day of work that wasn't really necessary. And it also changed my plan for finishing. Originally, I was planning to use our water-based lacquer that we use on all of our speakers. Because there was so much sapwood in this, it wasn't really going to turn out the color that I wanted. I wanted some dark walnut to contrast with the white, and this was really light sapwood, so I ended up switching my plan to a hard wax oil. In my last two videos, I showed a technique for attaching a floating panel using a roof flashing material that maintains some elasticity so it has some vibration damping properties. Another option for this is using something like sorbethane, and I'm going to show that method here. The challenge with sorbethane is that it doesn't act as an adhesive like this roof flashing does. The roof flashing can be used without any screws. With sorbethane, you need to have screws to attach the two pieces together, but by putting a screw straight through one panel and into the other, you're directly coupling them. So you have to make sorbethane washers to isolate everything again. The other thing with sorbethane is that it's more effective when you have smaller pieces than it is to cover the entire surface with sorbethane. There's also a set amount of compression that's ideal, which is somewhere between 25 to 33%. So it's a little more finicky to kind of get right. For this build, we decided to go ahead and do separate crossover boards. We've had a lot of questions recently on how to bi-amp our speakers, and it's definitely possible, but it takes understanding the schematic, and then you have to kind of modify the boards. So going forward, we're going to start splitting our boards into a woofer and tweeter section. That way, if you want to bi-amp, it makes it really easy. Our smart node boards are designed to try to make things as easy as possible for you to solder up. You're basically doing a paint by the numbers, where you're just connecting up similar letters. And I don't know what it is about building speakers, or maybe I'm just clumsy, but somehow I manage to make myself bleed every single time I build a pair of speakers. With this one, I caught my finger on one of the wires underneath the crossover board and stabbed it pretty good. As I tidy up the last little bits of the speaker here and connect everything up, most of you are probably wondering, how does this thing sound and was it worth it in the end? The only real negative to this speaker is that there is a little bit of a dip in the power response. Now, our 1TDX measure is almost identical to this, and it's had rave reviews from both reviewers and customers alike, and I really love that speaker. So this has a very similar tonality to that. The only real difference is that the tweeter is definitely going to be more detailed. It has a stronger attack and more air and sparkle. So if that's something you're looking for, this will definitely fit that bill. Overall, I definitely think it was a worthwhile upgrade, and this might be my new favorite tweeter. Please consider liking and subscribing if you like the video. It definitely helps our channel. Also, if you leave a comment, we try to respond to everyone as long as you're not a prick, and let us know what we can do better next time. We're always looking to improve. So with that, I'll leave you with some glamour shots.